So as we enter the exhibition, we're presented with a number of different sculptures, some from classical antiquity, some from Pokemon universe, as well as a new series of paintings. One of the first works that you encounter is a sculpture of Pericles, who was an Athenian statesman, like a senator. He's depicted with a Corinthian helmet, and this copy was actually produced from a stage of works. So the original of this was a Greek-era bronze, which was probably found at the Acropolis in Athens. Later, during the Roman period, marble copies of the originals were made, and this version is probably a Roman replica of an earlier Greek work. This version has been cast in pink quartz and optical quartz as well. The original of this work is owned by the RMN in Paris, of which I've gained access to create the cast. Other works in the exhibition, large-scale Charmander. I've done a smaller version of this work, quite a complex piece. In working with the Pokemon company on all of these works, they initially gave me access to their complete archive of characters, and as we know, the original versions of these were animation, hand-drawn animation. We had to translate that quality into a three-dimensional object. So the originals were done in the computer, and the surface of this was all hand sculpted. So all of the detail that was done in here was produced in my studio here in New York in clay. A mold was then made of the complete unit, and in this case, because of the complexity of the mold, the arms, the tail, and certain other elements were cast separate from it, reassembled, and then the entire piece was surfaced. This was the first painting that I made in this new series, and I had been thinking about a return to painting for a while. My studies originally were in painting, and in the last 10 years, most of my work has gone into a sculptural direction. So I started to imagine these paintings which were like Italian Capriccio, which was a scenario in which painters brought together sculpture and architecture from disparate geographic locations into one image. So you could imagine a sculpture from Rome, from Paris, all brought into the same unit. And in fact, what we have here in the depiction are all sculptural works that I've created, either which are present in this exhibition or were in the Paris 3020 exhibition last year. So we have the Venus of Aurel, the Venus de Milo. Back here in the shadows, we have Lucius Verus. And I imagined them in this kind of future ice cavern, right? This idea of the cavern as a kind of primal location for the sort of history of humanity, in a way. The Apollo Belvedere, which is a Roman era work and thought to be a Roman recreation from a Greek original. This work was discovered central Italy around the 15th century during the Renaissance, and certainly would have been heavy inspiration to sculptors of the Renaissance. It's a depiction of the Greek god Apollo standing as an archer, as if he's sort of just shot an arrow, and sculpted in this very complex contrapposto, and the balance of the work, the way that the figure almost appears to be falling forward or stepping forward, the gravity present in that, the way that the fabric is arched over the arm. All of these were thought to be very advanced ways of depicting human figure and fabric in the era. The original work is in the collection of the Vatican in Rome. In thinking about the further evolution of my paintings, I also wanted works that have a complex history bound up within them. This original sculptural work is a piece that I actually own in my collection, which is of the Venus Italica, sculpted in around 1810 by Antonio Canova. The complexity of the work at the time was thought to be one of the most incredible depictions of the Venus And the work was originally commissioned to replace an earlier version, a work from antiquity, which had been looted from the Medici compound in Rome. Canova was commissioned to replace the original, and in doing so, he decided to alter the form of the original, changing the position of the head, altering the way that the fabric covered and concealed and revealed the form of the female figure. The work is depicted in an outsized scale, much larger than it was originally sculpted. And in many of the paintings, I've used a figure or a series of figures in the foreground of the work, almost looking into the space. I spent a lot of time looking at 19th century German Romantic paintings depicting these kind of sublime, grand landscapes. And Caspar David Friedrich, who's one of my biggest inspirations in painting, often used a figure standing in the foreground of a work, peering off into the distance. We as viewers are then presented with the opportunity to kind of place ourselves in the position of the figure in the painting. This work has an interesting relationship with the Pericles work as it depicts Pericles' wife. The original statue in marble of a veiled woman is thought to be a copy of an earlier bronze 460 BCE work. The complex fabric sculpted in this work was a quite advanced depiction of fabric at the time that it was created. The original work from the Louvre's collection, Marble Head of a Veiled Woman, was thought to be a copy of a bronze head of Aspasia made around 400 BCE. The interesting relationship in the exhibition. Aspasia was the wife of Pericles, the other sculpture in the exhibition. In this version, the work is created in volcanic ash, pyrite crystal, and selenite crystal. So there are many Pokemon work also in the exhibition, and one of my favorite characters in this Pokemon universe, Mewtwo. It was revealed that Mewtwo was cloned from a fossilized eyelash of the original Mew that had been found by scientists. And I'm fascinated by the relationship of these contemporary icons and ancient sculpture. In the age of ancient Rome and Greece, the idea of these mythical gods having magical powers, having the ability to cheat death and live into the afterlife, alter the world around us, having a very similar relationship with characters like Mewtwo. This version was created in bronze based on an earlier calcite sculpture that I had created. And in a similar fashion to the way that the other works are created, these are all cast in sections. And the sort of advancement within the studio process here, I wanted to create these bronze works which appear as if they had been through a process of age or decaying, right, in advance of being shown here. So the patina that's on here almost looks like something we might find in a work from ancient Rome or Greece. The Tiffany Patina with this kind of degradation, this age to it. In the attempt to achieve a quality similar to some of the other works that are cast, this difference between the matte quality of the surface and the glossy quality of the crystal, I've hand polished all of the crystal in here to bring them back to their original bronze. This work is a second century work which was thought to be a copy of an earlier Hadriatic sculpture. Very complex fabric for an ancient work, and there's all kinds of symbolism present in the piece. The Sleeping Ariadna is a Roman Hadriatic copy of a Hellenistic sculpture from the 2nd century BC. The reclining figure in this kind of chiffon sits with her legs extended, and there was an initial sense that she was Cleopatra. There's a snake bracelet which is wrapped on the upper left arm, which was taken for the asp by which she died. This work was purchased from the Roman Angelo Maffei in 1512 by Pope Julius II and was installed at the Vatican Palace. The original is neighbors with two other works that are in this exhibition, the Laocoon on the third floor of the exhibition, and the eroded Belvedere Apollo. Blue calcite crystal, this work, and the clear optical quartz which you can see coming out of the crystal. One of the interesting things for me with these works has always been this idea that they're sort of decaying, right? They look as if they're kind of falling apart. But there is this sense with crystal that it's actually something which grows together, it's forming over time. So there is a question to the works: are they actually falling apart, or is this work actually forming over millennia back into an original form? This work is a much larger version of a number of other pieces that I've done of the ancient sculpture of Zeus, which the original, which is not in this scale, is found at the Louvre in Paris. The original actually sits, it's a complete torso, and sits on top of a 15 or 20 foot tall pillar. And I've created this work in calcite, as well as a smaller bronze version. This is the first and largest of this type of bronze work that I've made. Thinking about the idea of having variation in surface, right, to bring out this idea of this crystallization forming in the works. These pieces were meant to be exhibited in an exterior condition, and as the rain and weather get within this work, it will continue to oxidize and age throughout. And the newest body of work in the exhibition, which almost didn't make it into this show, it's kind of last-minute addition of works that I had been experimenting with in the studio. The original works that were created for this, magazines, video cassettes, cameras, all of the context around the subject matter in the works was invented. Life After DMC, John DeLorean Tells All. There's a little quote on the cover here, which is actually a quote that I've said. Every artwork that will ever be made is out there already. The materials just need to be brought together. Also got Ronnie Feig on the politics of breakfast options. And I've created sort of two different variations of these works, the tabletop variations, as well as these versions that are sort of wall-mounted, and this beautiful glow that's coming from the work. This work has a number of different elements within it. It has a fictional book called Setting the Scene for California Modernism. Includes subject matter John Lautner, Snoop Dogg, and Joan Didion. And the cover depiction is a very famous John Lautner house. Days magazine from the year 3019, and the address label reads Jefferson Hack, Elephant and Castle. Jefferson Hack, kind of legendary founder of Days magazine, and this incredible London figure. Elephant and Castle was the original studio where Days magazine originated. Rolling Stone magazine from 3020, Aaliyah, remembering the icon. Triumph in Cleveland, From Darkness to Light. This book, which is a fictional book depicting subject matter Henri Cartier-Bresson, James Turrell, and the architect Peter Zumthor. And let's see what I can see with this Source magazine. Dapper Dan, Outcast. There's an Apple mouse sitting in the back here, as well as an Etch-a-Sketch and a video cassette of E.T. Combination of magazines, cereal boxes, cameras, many different elements that have kind of come together to form the basis of this sort of long journey of work that I've been making. The continuation of the exhibition on the third floor includes a further continuation of works from classical antiquity. This one is a more recent work. Paintings depicting objects from previous sculptural work depicted in an outsized scale, continuing with the theme of these caverns, figures looking at these monumental works in caverns, as well as the inclusion of these Pokemon works. This is a depiction of Cubone, which is one of my favorite Pokemon characters and has probably one of the most complex backstories of any of the Pokemon. As we know, the skull that Cubone wears is the skull of his dead mother. The theory says that Cubone is actually a Charmander who's lost his flame. And the theory goes like this. If Cubone's mother died, and Cubone's mother was a Charizard, Charmander babies are given their flame from the Charizard mother. Cubone's mother died, he's not able to get the flame, and therefore he is a Charmander with no flame. Gengar, one of my other favorite Pokemon characters, depicted here maybe in the actual scale that Gengar would have been or is. One interesting relationship between this work and some of the other works from classical antiquity, oftentimes, as is used in the Apollo of Belvedere, a supporting structure, either a rock or a tree limb, is used to create balance, physical balance and physical strength for the work. This depiction of Gengar includes a rock in which he's resting on, as well as the inclusion of a Pokeball here. Gengar is both the singular and the plural form of the species. The smoky amethyst crystal depicted, as well as the optical quartz. This work was entirely hand sculpted originally in clay, and then a mold was made, quite a large mold, split in multiple locations, the arms and other forms of it actually being joined to it after the fact. The largest painting that I've created in this series is a kind of culmination of all of the different aspects of the exhibition and includes many pieces that are actually present in the exhibition. The Venus of Aurel, here depicted in bronze, depicted in the painting inside of this massive cavern, combined with figures from Pokemon universe, Mewtwo sitting over here, as well as the ancient depiction of the city of Rome. In the top right corner, you have the legs of this monumental scale Venus Italica, which is a work that's depicted in a painting on the first floor. And in the foreground, in mostly silhouette, Pikachu. Maybe a trainer here, or just a figure looking into this strange landscape, a combination of different eras of contemporary capriccio, if we want to think about it like that. All of the paintings that I've made are done in this gradient scale of color. A lot's been written about the fact that I'm colorblind, and when I'm making these works, I'm using completely pre-mixed palette, so I don't have to think when I'm jumping from one tone to the next. It's actually written on the bottle. Typically with these paintings, I'll start with the darkest color, so I'm creating the scenario of the cavern and going in, bringing it out from dark to light. The Venus of Aurel, which is a work that I've done a number of different versions of. One of the most famous works from classical antiquity. The original housed at the Louvre is slightly smaller in scale than this, and has its own complex history. Whenever I'm looking for works to use for this purpose, I'm looking for things that have an interesting, complex backstory to them. This original work, an ancient work, was discovered, brought to the Louvre, and actually was recomposed. So it was found in pieces. The head was broken off, and many of the components around the fabric were restored. The arms, the ball, the mirror in her left hand were all added. This was the tradition of restoration during that period. In the early 20th century, there was a kind of move back to de-restoring some of these works, right? To think about the way that they would have been depicted as they came out of the ground, as they were found. In fact, our entire understanding of ancient work is sort of skewed by the fact that these works were originally painted. They didn't appear in marble, in pure marble, as we often find them today. So this work was de-restored, right? Sections of the fabric that had been fixed were actually removed. But the decision of the curators at that time, early 20th century, to leave the arms, the ball, because it was created by a well-known French sculptor of the era. And I'm very interested in these ideas about decisions that are made which influence our understanding of history, of art history, and how that sort of complex narrative can be played with and skewed. This work, which is a bust of Lao Kun, is actually a section of a much larger piece, one of the most famous works from classical antiquity, a depiction of Lao Kun and his sons. The work was discovered in the Renaissance, and it's very possible that Michelangelo himself rushed down to the excavation site once word of this magnificent work had spread. Nobody had seen works from antiquity that depicted a kind of anguish like this. Most of the works that we find depict honor. The figures are in a very composed fashion. This work differed from those works in the expression, the anguish depicted in the figure. This work is cast in blue calcite and quartz crystal. Even the detail that comes out present in the original. This bust of Lao Kun is a section of a larger work from antiquity known as Lao Kun and his sons. Probably one of the most famous ancient sculptures. It was excavated in Rome in 1506, and there's a story that the Pope sent Michelangelo down to the excavation site to understand and be the first to witness this magnificent work. It's very likely that this is the same statue praised in the highest terms by Roman writers on art, Pliny the Elder, depicting the Trojan priest Lao Kun and his sons being attacked at sea by serpents. The agony that's present in the face was a very rare thing to see in ancient work, which is part of the reason why this piece has become so critical in the canon of Western art. The original work in its full scale is on view in the public collection of the Vatican Museums in Vatican City. This is a depiction and a kind of encapsulation meant to be of the city of Rome. It's also the sculpture that was depicted in the painting on the other end of the exhibition, this version being cast in pink calcite, optical clear quartz. And I love the scale of this piece being slightly off. You know, if you view this work, if you stand next to this work directly, it's only maybe 75% bigger than original human scale. And there's something about that quality, this shift in perspective, the shift in scale,